Hi and welcome to today's lesson. So today we're going to be looking at reading. This is just a brief introduction to reading. So I think reading is really important way for people to learn new knowledge, and also it helps you learn grammar and vocabulary without actually studying it. So I just want to ask you, what are the two biggest problems you have with reading in English? So can you pause the video, write down your two biggest problems, either in the comments below or write it down on a piece of paper. Okay, pause the video now and write down the two comments. Pause it. I said pause it. Okay, so hopefully you pause your video, you've written down the two biggest problems you have with reading in English. So in my experience, the things that students tell me that they have the biggest problems with are not knowing the vocabulary and not having enough time to read and understand everything. So today I'm going to look at 3 reading strategies or 3 reading skills which will help you overcome these problems. So in today's little video we're going to be looking at how we read, and by the end you should be more aware of the different ways that we read and have a better understanding of why we read in different ways at different times, and then you will be able to apply them to help you with your English reading. So to start with, I just want you to write down all the things that you have read in any language in the last 3 days. So that's absolutely everything that you've read. So for example, it could be sports reports online. It could be road signs. As you're walking down the street, you see the name of a road. It could be maybe a warning sign. Maybe subtitles in a movie. So you're watching a movie in your own language or in English, and the subtitles, the little words at the bottom, you're reading those. Okay, so pause the video, write down at least 10 other things that you've read in the last 3 days. Ideally, if you can get 20, that would be great. You've got 2 minutes. Pause the video now. Okay, so I trust that you've written down your items that you've read. So these are some of the things that you could have written. Who knows? Okay, so there's lots of things here. Things like textbooks. So books you study at school, magazines, maps, receipts, bills, menus, adverts, newspapers, the back of a book, a subway map, a WeChat message. It could be a Line message, could be a Cow Talk message, could be a Messenger message, could be a WhatsApp message. Body language I put there. You could argue whether we read it or not. A book, so a storybook, an email. We've got the next few are to do with school, so a maths exam question, an English exam paper, an English reading passage, an English writing question. Okay, a contract to buy a house, a bus number, or the name of a movie. So all of these things are things that people read regularly. Okay, so what is this? This is obviously a receipt. As a customer, when you go into a restaurant, you get your receipt. Where do you look? I think most of us, the first thing we want to know is how much we need to pay. So our eyes instantly would go to either this $12.59, because we know generally on receipts the price we pay is in bigger writing. It's always a number. It's about 2/3 of the way down the paper. Often it's under some dotted lines like this, and it's always next to the word total. Okay, so if I was given this receipt, probably the only thing I would look at 90% of the time would be this $12.59. If that's about what I expect, I wouldn't read anymore. I would just pay the bill, and that's it basically. If, however, I ordered a 3-course meal with roast duck, with champagne, and I was expecting the bill to come to about $200. If I looked and I saw this $12.59, one of two things would happen. First thing that could happen, I look at the amount, I look at the waiter, I give the waiter $15 and I run quickly out of the restaurant. The other thing that could happen is I look at this amount, I look at the waiter, I look back at this amount, I think to myself, this can't be right, something's wrong, then I would look back up. Or, so I had a 44 ginger lover and pork brown rice. They seem to have forgotten the champagne, the roast duck, and all the other things I had. So then, really, I should tell the waiter, so I think you've made a mistake. So generally 90% of the time though, when we get a bill, we will just scan and look at this figure. Okay, this is a magazine. So National Geographic is quite a famous magazine. It also has a TV channel. So it's quite an interesting magazine. Not the easiest to read. So if I was reading a magazine in this, an article in this magazine, I would just have a general interest in the subject. So if I read it quite quickly to get the main ideas, that's fine for me. If I am really super interested in the article and perhaps it affects my career or my family, or I have friends in that situation, then I would probably read more slowly. I would read in more detail. But for this kind of magazine, 90% of the time I would just skim to get the main idea. Okay, this is an example of a contract. According to this, it's between Mr. Michael Jackson. So signing a contract is a very important legal document. If you don't understand everything in your contract, you could have big problems later on. So it could end up costing you lots of money later on. So before you sign a contract, it's important to read through and understand everything in detail. Okay, so we've looked at 3 different ways of reading. So skimming is when you read quickly to get the main idea. You don't worry about all of the smaller details. For scanning, you're looking very quickly for specific words or perhaps words with the opposite meaning. You don't really even look at the other words. Once you find the words you look for, perhaps then you read that one sentence or those few words in detail. The last way of reading is reading in detail, when you're reading slowly to try and understand everything as much as possible. So have a think about the 3 things we looked at. So we looked at the receipt, a magazine article, and a contract. How would you read those 3 different things? Which would you skim? Which would you scan? Which would you read in detail? Okay, so now have a look back at the things you wrote earlier. In your book, I want you to write down which ones you would skim, which ones you would scan, and which ones you would read in detail. So this may take you about 5 to 10 minutes. So you really need to think carefully, what is your purpose in reading these things, and then how does that affect how you read it. Okay, so pause the video now, take 5 to 10 minutes to try and complete this. Okay, so hopefully you've had a chance to look at your videos, you've had a chance to think about how you read different things. We're going to look at one thing here. So you're going to look at the same thing and how you read it in different situations. So you're reading a magazine article about the iPhone 11 versus Samsung Galaxy. So think about how you would read it in these different situations. So if you're planning to buy a new mobile phone and you're not sure which phone to buy, either the iPhone 11 or the Samsung Galaxy, how would you read it? So first, let's think. So both these phones probably cost about $1,000. So it's not a small amount of money. So you probably want to make sure you make the right decision. So in this case, I would say the small details are probably quite important. So you're probably, the first time you read the magazine, maybe you skim read to get the main ideas. After that, possibly you read more slowly, you read in detail to really try and understand everything. Okay, so we don't just read in one way all of the time with the same article. Okay, in our second situation, you bought a mobile phone last month and you don't have enough money to buy a new phone, but you're quite interested in phones generally. So here, is it important you understand every small detail? Probably not, because you've just got a general interest. So you don't need to read in detail. Are we looking for specific information? No, we just want a general understanding. So here we would skim, so we're reading quite quickly just to get the main ideas. If there are words we don't know in the small details, that is fine, it's not a problem. Okay, in our last situation, you know you want to buy an iPhone 11, but you don't know when it is being released or how much it costs. So when you get this magazine, you will just scan for information. You want to know the cost, so you'd look for things like $sign, numbers, maybe the word price or cost. You also want to know when it is being released, so you'd look for things like dates, when. So you would just scan for that information. Anything else you wouldn't care about. It should be the same thing that you do when you're scanning for information in English. You just focus on what you want to know. Don't worry about all of the other things. Okay, so earlier I asked you to write down some of the things you skim, what you scan, and what you read in detail. So these are some of the things that I wrote down. Couple of things. There is no one right answer. At different times we would read different things in different ways. So for example, let me have a look. A WeChat message. So I put a WeChat message, but it could be any other social media app. So it could be Line, Kakao Talk, WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger. So let's say you've just moved to a new country. You get a message from your parents. You would probably read that in detail because you really want to know everything about them. You really miss them, and you really want to spend time with them, find out as much as possible. So you would read in detail. Maybe after you've been there for about 3 months, you've started to get busy in your own life. You're going to classes, you're making friends, you're going out at the weekends, you have your own life, you're doing things. Probably then, from many messages from your parents, you would skim read. You wouldn't worry about all of the small details. Then probably after about 6 months, your money started to run out, and you sent your parents a message, "Dad, can you send me some money please?" Then when you get a message from your dad, you probably scan to see, okay, how much money is he sending me? When is he going to send me the money? Okay, so that is just an example of how you can read the same kind of thing in very different ways depending on what you want to know. And of course, I'm sure nobody listening to this would just scan messages from their parents to see how much money they're getting. So just to summarize, we've looked at 3 different ways of reading. Skimming, which is reading quite quickly to get the main idea. Scanning, which is looking for particular words and looking for them very, very quickly, maybe not even looking at the other words. And reading in detail. So reading in detail is when you read very slowly to try and understand all of the details. One thing to note about reading in detail, it is very unlikely you would need to read a whole article in detail. In English exams, probably the most you need to read in detail, you must read the questions in detail. For things like true, false, not given, you scan for the keywords and then you read 1 or 2 sentences in detail. That is all. Okay, so thank you for listening. If you've got any more questions, or if you found this useful or not useful, it'd be great if you could just add a comment to let me know what you're thinking. And if there's other things you'd like me to help you with, just post it in the comments below. Okay, have a great day.